Good morning, value viewers. This is Talking Point here on WESN, your content capital. Sean Michael Small here once again to kick off the week with you. A lot has happened over the weekend, although we should be quite grateful that we haven't necessarily gotten the same level of tragedy that we had in the week. However, that is not to say that the weekend was all celebratory, I should say. Of course, I am here by myself, solo, once again. My co-host cannot join me. Hashtag Freaky to Show. We await the day that the dynamic duo, are back together again. However, later on in the program, hopefully we'll have former youth parliamentarian Camille Pascal. However, I want to just kick off the morning by acknowledging, before we get into the day's stories, of, well, the heat. This morning, the sun is back out in full force. After having quite a pleasant overcast weekend, if I do say so myself, always my favored weather condition. Now, with that said, attempts to beat the heat, we must still be careful and we must still be responsible. And this is not about throwing blame, but I do just want to mention one of the big tragedies that happened over the weekend. A 5-year-old boy drowned at a water park. The family is saying that there should have been lifeguards, and I understand that, and they're right. Any sort of swimming area, body of water, accessible for use by the public to a reasonable degree. Yeah, I'm not talking about open ocean when you're off of your own sailing boat or pirogue or whatever. But to a reasonable degree, whether it is a public pool or private establishment open to the public, should be monitored with lifeguards, or a public beach. Now, with that said, this is Trinidad and Tobago, and to be honest, I essentially view lifeguards as not something that I expect to be there, something that I would just like to have there. And if it's there, I'm happy for it, and if they tell me to move, be careful, if they give me instructions, I'll listen. But this is TNT. I don't expect there to be lifeguards at every swimming establishment. And to be honest, I don't think I have ever seen in TNT a lifeguard at a pool. So while there should be these things for safety, let's not kid ourselves. Most of us know what we're signing up for when we go to swim somewhere. And if we have young children, most of us know these are the responsibilities. We have to look out for them. We have to take care of them. I've gone through this to some extent with my young nephews. I've gone through this on our own property. Anyone that goes to Tobago, hotel swimming pools don't have lifeguards. It's just, I myself have gone through this as a child. We can't take it for granted. Not all children are going to be careful. Not all children are going to be responsible. And of course, not all 4, 5, 6-year-olds are going to be able to swim very well. So I'm not saying that it's the family's fault, because I don't know the circumstances of what transpired that morning. However, I will say this. Let's not think, oh, but it won't happen to me, and we take it for granted. There was an incident of a child that drowned in a hotel swimming pool. It became my warning when people would come to Tobago, until one day I actually met relatives of the unfortunate victim. So it could happen close to you. Don't take it for granted. Don't look to assign blame after the fact, because that's not going to rectify the situation. So when we're trying to beat the heat, folks, do it responsibly, do it carefully, especially if you have young children, but it shouldn't even really be limited only to young children. All right. Now let's get into the meat of the day. Let's kick off this morning's daily review. And our first story that I wanted to kick off this morning. And I'm not too sure to what extent this would qualify as conspiracy theory. The Minister of Finance had to basically come out and say, I had nothing to do with Republic Bank cutting the credit card limit, or at least nothing to do directly. Because he's basically had to come out and say, I did not give any instructions for this. In fact, he even said that, or it's reported that he said that he only knew after the fact. Now, the ministry has injected some more foreign exchange into circulation, 50 million US dollars. This is after commercial entities, or rather the banks, well, usage of credit cards for foreign exchange has reached close to US $6 million a day in September. However, I do again wonder to what extent is this commercial use. And perhaps on one hand, one might ask, okay, well, maybe there should be more ways to separate commercial to private use. Now, granted, some of that, of course, is going to be personal usage as well. But business use, private individual use, should we separate it? Are we going to have to now try to regulate that, put things in place for that? That's going to cost more money, that's going to cause more complication, that's going to cause more barriers, more stress and headache. It just goes to show to what extent we've reached now, because it seems as though more and more businesses started using credit cards to bypass restrictions banks might have when it comes to giving out foreign exchange in terms of cash or in terms of electronic money, that is to say, digital figures in a bank account. Because small businesses, medium businesses, chamber heads, they are basically complaining about the lack of availability. So the 50 million might help, but then when you look at the heights of September, and it's not to say that every day was 6 million US a day, this might just last only for 10 extra days of cover. So it brings up a lot of questions with regards to how healthy is our position and how long can we stand going at this pace. Dragon deal was apparently signed last week, but that's still at best years away. We're talking I don't know if they could do it in as little as 3, that is to say, get the pipeline set up, put other things in place. But it's not going to help us now. We're going to have at least a couple of years in between. So Christmas is coming up, Carnival is coming up. These are going to be 2 big commercial times of the year in Trinidad and in Tobago in different ways and in various ways. Are we going to see a slowdown to our economy because certain businesses, and let's face it, a lot of it is going to be retail and a lot of it is going to be online shopping. And certain businesses might not see the expected Christmas bump that we're going to have this year. And I don't know if any economist has crunched the numbers to show us why is it that we can't find, where appropriate and available, local alternatives. And I get it, we're not going to find a local alternative to a cell phone, that is to say manufactured. They still have to come in, even if it's used. Cell phones, laptops, other electronics. Well, we used to have locally assembled cars, not anymore. But at the same time, does everything have to be imported? And we're not really exploring it outside of maybe agriculture, which is a big deal. I don't know if it is the only thing that matters. We have, and we've touched on this before, many graduates from designing courses, many local clothes designers, and yet the majority of the clothes we wear seems to be foreign-made brands. All right, it's something that has to we have to really take a look at with regards to our balance of trade, with regards to what's being manufactured here, with regards to what incentives we're providing. Even tourism is not going to bail us out because that needs a ramp up that's going to take too long as well. So at the end of the day, this readjustment period we're going to feel some pain. Moving on, in a related story, and this is just quick, the Manufacturing Association said it's troubled by port delays, which is hurting trade. And I get that. It's another barrier, although one might argue the government has no incentive to deal about this barrier when we have a foreign exchange shortage, assuming if you share my perception of there being a shortage. Why are you going to free up the ease of doing trade and make it faster, smoother, more efficient when we seemingly already reached the point where we're over the limit of what we could afford? So with regards to the capacity that our foreign exchange generation can handle, we're over that limit. So the government does not really have an incentive to do anything about it, which I'm sure a lot of local businesses don't want to hear, but that might just be the reality. Also, this is not new. So I don't know if perhaps some of these manufacturers had under the table deals, unofficial understandings, even if they did not include money being passed or anything illegal going on. You know, if they just got some preferential treatment, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, this is not new. So I'm kind of wondering why now? And if you're saying, well, we have a foreign exchange shortage, so at least make it easier for us to trade. Again, I don't really see the government's incentive for fixing this problem, because if they fix this problem, it might potentially just put more pressure on the foreign exchange shortage. It might cause for demand to increase in foreign exchange because goods could move easier. Now, if we talk about goods leaving the country, and I know I have heard far less about that. If we talk about goods leaving the country, that's a different conversation, because that's hampering our ability to in foreign exchange. But what we're hearing is lengthy custom delays at airports, ocean boards, and transit sheds. We're talking about stuff coming in. So again, I don't really see the government having incentive to do something that will then basically kick the problem down the line to what is already an untenable situation. All right, next story there. I mentioned this before, I believe. A few more details have come out about it. The Works and Transport Minister has basically announced plans to procure, or rather to construct a new cargo vessel. It's balancing out the needs. Yes, you want cargo. Yes, you want it fast. Yes, you also want it to have passengers to make it as efficient as possible. Passengers want more speed. Cargo doesn't necessarily care about speed, right? At some point, speed becomes inefficient for a cargo vessel. Of course, the reverse is true as well. You could have a cargo vessel that literally just crawls, and then it so slowly that it doesn't matter how much it can carry, it'll take forever to get there. So it's a balancing act, right? It's a balancing act. I get that. So they're putting those factors into consideration. Of course, price is the unspoken factor as well. But I think the real key is it's being said that we're going to get it within 18 months. The minister said it's going to take between 14 to 16 months for the vessel to be built once the tendering process is completed. That's the key word there. And then, after it's built, it all depends on how the process of its shakedown cruises go. When a boat is newly built, you have to have it for a shakedown cruise. You have to check and see what the problems are, what adjustments need to be made. You know, even military vessels, cargo vessels, sailing vessels, you don't just, yeah, we launch and you're perfect. It's just not a thing with ships, all right? So, tendering process isn't finished. So the clock hasn't started on those 18 months there, 16 months there, 14 months there. Then, of course, if there are delays to the shipbuilder, and then there's the shakedown cruise, then there's the time to deliver it, depending on where it's manufactured, because I believe some of those fast ferries came from halfway around the world. So it took several weeks well for it to get there, if not a couple of months. So We're not looking at something that's going to be here within 2.5 years. We're probably looking, depending on how long the tendering takes, we're probably looking at 3.5 years, maybe 4. So, and that's assuming we get it right the first time. When we had issues with the ferry service, back when it was the Express and the Spirit, we didn't get it right the first time. We had a placeholder. So that's assuming this cargo vessel, we get it right, the shakedown cruises are right, and we don't end up having a lemon of a ship, which is not the main concern. But the main concern is, since it's custom built to order, we might have buyer's remorse if we determine the wrong factors that are important, and we build the ship with parameters and then regret it. So we don't know what those parameters are. At least I don't think it's in the reports. So we'll wait and see how that goes. And I'm sure to some extent it'll also depend on what the tendering process will allow. Last story to hit before the break. And I might get into this with our contributor as well. And I'm sure that the professor will want to scream corrections at me, rhetorically speaking. NIB has reported a $1.2 billion, well, it's really above 1.2, it could be as much as $1.36 billion deficit, which had to have been made up with by funds, in some cases, well, from the actual fund itself. Money from the fund had to make up the shortfall, which of course decreases the fund. The professor, of course, he's complained that mismanagement of the fund is the main problem. However, it looks as though there is a greater demand on NIB as more people are basically now qualifying for their pension, etc., etc. Whereas current payments into the fund has decreased slightly between last year and this year, I believe. If that trend continues, if that is a trend and that trend continues, then it goes back to what we've been saying here on Talking Point. Yes, the fund's management could be an issue, and that should also be addressed. But there's something to be said when contributions are falling while the number of people subscribing to the benefits are increasing. And that, in the long run, even if you could have proper fund management, could hold it off in the long run. And before COVID, during the first 2 years of Talking Point, we kept saying it's 1.399 million people in TNT. And then this year, when I checked, all of a sudden the figure basically said 1.5. Right? Now, to what extent is that because of migrants, and to what extent is that just, people weren't able to migrate abroad, and our population with births, etc., just naturally grew. So this is something in the long run that matters. The government is saying, well, the government has the retirement age increase, hovering on the horizon. Unions are saying, don't do it. Chambers are saying, do it. My only thing is this: if we could accept our politicians, our prime ministers over 70, if we could accept ministers and MPs and senators and our prime minister, these are not easy jobs. Some of them are over 70, or coming close to 70. They're well over 60, some of them, right? Now, granted, they're not doing URP labor every day, CPEP labor. They're not cleaning the road, cutting grass, laying bricks. It's not physical manual work. But a prime minister's job could be quite stressful. Apparently, there's no retirement age on that. So I think there's an interesting dichotomy in the country where we accept that our politicians could age, despite the fact that we wish they would retire, right? But no one is kicking up a fuss about that, about saying, well, now we can't have these old men here running the country when we're saying 60 is the retirement age. You shouldn't really be working. If you want to work, you can, but you shouldn't be working. That's what the retirement age is saying. Don't be working after 60. But hey, the guy running the show, he could be 70. There's a disconnect there. So I'll leave that with you. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll welcome my collaborator of the day, Mr. Pascal, former youth parliamentarian at multiple levels, brilliant young man. We'll get his take on some important issues facing TNT. Stay tuned. This is Talk About on WSN, your content capital.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
You gave us the inspiration to be first. We gave you the solutions that put you first. You walked with us side by side, and we continue to serve you with pride. First Citizens celebrates with you 30 years of achieving dreams, shaping success stories, and painting brighter futures together. And together, we'll accomplish so much more. First Citizens, together, 30 and beyond.
Let the Home Store turn your house into a home you love. Get everything you need to give your home that special look and feel. We offer household items, lawn and garden, paint center, hardware, plumbing, lighting and electrical, toys and storage solutions. 5 convenient locations: 6th Avenue Barataria, The Falls at Westmall, Pennywise Plaza Shoguanas, C3 Center Branch and C3 San Fernando. Check out our Facebook page for more information and come visit us today. The Home Store. Turn your house into a home you love.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, The Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Fan Zone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Congratulations to the Nicole Lawson Live Show, which received special mention in the Best Magazine Program category at the CBU Caribbean Media Awards in August 2023.
On the next episode of Nicole Lawson Live, Living in Victory Every Day.
If you had a choice to go back and be the 18-year-old,
Nope.
But for most of us, June, we wish we had youth again, at least a little 20 years or 10 years, and you are saying, no, right where I am,
No.
this is who I want to be. You ain't going back.
Exactly.
You don't want to go back at all. Why?
No. I don't want to be 18.
Yeah.
I don't want to be 35. I don't want to be 50. I love being me because I see the maturity in me that I will look back at and say, you really did that? Like, really? That's the best you could have done?
Seriously?
Reduce your expenses. You must find a way to cut back on your expenses. Okay, if it means writing down your monthly expenses, you have to do that. And you need to be able to see which ones you need to cut off.
An encore of Nicole Lawson Live, Living in Victory Every Day. Every Sunday at 8 p.m. and Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. on WESN.
My name is Carl Media. I'm the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
Welcome back to Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen. And I am joined by former youth parliamentarian on multiple levels. We're talking national, we're talking regional, we're talking Commonwealth level parliamentarian. And I say former, but then there were times when I said former youth parliamentarian, and then he's right back in the youth parliament there. But maybe no longer. Maybe he's retired from that scene. This is, of course, Kemuel Pascal. Kemuel, what's up? It's good to see you again.
Yes, hi Sean, good morning. Good morning to Trinidad and Tobago, all our viewers and listeners as well. It's my pleasure to be here on this great Tuesday.
Now, I just want to ask you this quick about the last thing that I spoke about before the break, before we get into the bigger topic to start off with. And that is retirement age. NIB has a deficit or a shortfall of 1.2 last year billion, they're reporting. I think they had to dip into the fund to pay it off. Some could argue, one of our callers argue, it's the issue is management of the fund. Others say it's demographics. The demographics are making the situation untenable. We see this around the world. France had big protests about it. It was included in reports, and we monitored that for a while. But I said, well, isn't it weird, at least in the public sector, where the retirement age is 60, but politicians could go on, including the head of the country, you know, at 70, be 70 years old or even older. And I actually think, you know, and I don't necessarily know what that means fully. I just think it's weird that we have that difference. And I'm for raising retirement age, not necessarily to 70, but depending on the job, to 65. What are your thoughts on that?
On raising the retirement age specifically, yeah?
Raising it. Yeah, but with regards to the fact that it's, you know, politicians could go on way older, but we're telling people, well, retire by 60.
Well, if we're talking something like term limits for, let's say, prime ministers, then okay, I can understand that. But in terms of like reason, in terms of them having like a cap on like being like, let's say, a leader, like a prime minister, like vying for political office to become the prime minister, I would say no, because I still feel at times, I'm saying at times, I'm not saying that's necessarily the case now, but at times there are politicians who are probably well over into their 60s and maybe even into their 70s who can still contribute in some way, shape or form, even at the level of being a prime minister. So I would not necessarily agree with that.
Okay, but then, you know, with regards to retirement age, you know, you're the young guy, I'm the old guy, I should be the one saying, you know, keep it at 60. What do you think about raising it to 65? This is a very controversial topic, and I don't know if we have enough data to give like definitive, objective statements on it, but what are just your initial thoughts so far?
I mean, many people would say yes, and many would say no, as you would have mentioned, but I feel as though it's something that the conversation is there, it has been there. It probably has been given more credence over the last year or so, especially when we look at the NIB fund, as you raised before. There has been a deficit which has worsened over the last 5 years, coming from 2018 up to 2022. And that would have been recently pointed out from the report that was the 2022 report, which was laid in the House of Representatives just maybe about 2 or 3 months ago. So I think it's something that is consideration, needs to be given consideration. Obviously, the unions may or may not be in favor of it, but I do believe that it's a conversation that needs to be had, and we need to decide upon it very quickly, even if it's that we're going to raise retirement age on a gradual phase basis.
I mean, that might be the easiest way to do it, but somebody is going to feel, you know, that they got the raw end of the deal, no matter how you do it, how you cut it off, right? It might be young people like yourselves that might be looking back. My grandparents, they retired at 60 and I had to wait till 75. We might, you know, who knows where we'll reach depending on how the economics turns out. But I want to shift focus because we had something that I guess I try not to think about it every weekend, but it still bothers me as I start to think about it again. And that is with regards to gun violence. Crime this year, in my opinion, it seems like it's more or less going out of control. I have reached the point, Kemuel, where I don't want to hear officials say, well, it's gangsters killing gangsters anymore. Because I don't think they're 10-year. I mean, I've heard that they even recruit in some cases in primary schools, but really and truly, we don't have 10-year-olds doing drive-by shootings and things like that, right? And we've had even children younger than that be part of the collateral damage earlier in the year in some very aggressive or vicious gun attacks where it seemed as though they're just spraying and praying. They don't really care who they hit. Do you agree with me that the time for that talk, as much as they say, well, major crimes are under control, they're not necessarily reducing. The murder rate might be maintained at something less than on a relative scale to what was last year, but it's not necessarily reducing significantly. But I still think it's out of control. What do you think?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. In fact, just last night I was sharing on Facebook that it's like 3 children were killed last Thursday and an adult, and 5 others wounded in Guanapo. And it's like we've just moved on from that so very seamlessly. And I think that's what it is. It's that the murder rate is, of course, out of control. I think at last count, I think it's about 435 murders at this point in time, and we're only at the 26th of September. We still have October, November, and even December to go in the year. And so while the police may come on television every so often and say, well, we are seeing a reduction in these types of crime, the murder rate is really what people used to judge. Crime by, and as you mentioned, it's not the excuse of, well, it's gangster and gangster violence cannot continue we can't continue to hear that from our politicians every day. And we're simply asking the question, yes, we understand that it's your job as politicians to create policy and implement them by way of parliaments and whatever way else, but it's really for the police and the law enforcement agencies to actually do the work. And so the thing about it is that when are we going to see some form of real crackdown in terms of getting rid of the guns? Because we've taken this soft approach for so very long. In terms of, we understand the type of violence that we're seeing is in most instances, gang violence, a lot of violence using firearms. But when are we going to ensure that our borders are properly locked down, that our ports are secured? How it is that we can find so many guns at different bonds, and then it's like, so these things are not traced back to the source. Somebody had to ship these items into the country. It has to reach somebody else at the end. So when are we actually going to ask the right questions or do what is necessary?
The irony, of course, is, Manufacturers Association is complaining our customs being too slow. And it's like we're too slow, but even being slow, we're not thorough. One would think, yeah, we could check everything, but it'll take forever to get stuff off the port. And I don't know, maybe some of us might be fine with that. Some of us might not. I do have to ask, you mentioned it yourself, the conversation seemed to have moved on quite quickly. Now, there were a couple of stories, kind of updates in the daily papers today. There's still no word on what the motive was, which is kind of troubling to me. All of the victims, whether the wounded or the deceased, are under 25. Now, the ones, the adults maybe could have been involved in something, but we don't necessarily want to assume that. That might be the thing that everybody is going to be quick to assume, but I still want to hear, if that was the case, I think the police might have an idea already. But the conversation for the most part has moved on. The community, of course, they've had to try to deal with the fallout mostly on their own, while the rest of the country just, hey, national awards, and what have you. And I'll get to that, one of what the president had to say that night later on. Is it that we're kind of complacent? We think, well, it's not going to happen to us? Because I warn people with regards to there's a report of a child drowning in a water park. We're going to try to beat the heat. Don't take it for granted. Not just children, but even, young adults, your own safety as well. I do wonder if there's this sense, and it's a very common mistake to make, to be complacent, because it's not going to happen to us. It happens to whoever else but us, but me, but mine, but the people around me. And is it that we're just taking things for granted too much now?
I don't think it's that, I think we have become desensitized to crime as a population. That it's like, okay, if it doesn't affect me, or I am not the intended target, or it doesn't affect my family, or my child, or my daughter, all right, it's just another day. I have to ensure my safety and my preservation until it hits home. And then we probably start calling on the government to ensure that our ports are properly locked down, ensure that the Coast Guard is sufficiently funded, ensure they have vessels. I think that's really what it has become. Crime has just become commonplace, and now crime has become so very normalized in our society. It's like, okay, a child could be murdered and we go back to business as normal the next week. No, it cannot be that that's where we're at. And it cannot be that we're saying, well, it's not my responsibility. It has to be that we are all taking responsibility collectively. Yes, the government has their role to play. Obviously, they more than likely have one of the larger role to play between them and the national security forces, and of course us as citizens. But I think it can't be that we become complacent in relation to crime and violence and the whole, because a lot of crime is not just with firearms or stem from drug-related things. A lot of the crime that we're seeing now is intimate partner violence and those types of crimes that we cannot afford to just say, okay, well, just another crime. Okay, yeah. A man kill a woman, a woman kill a man. We can't just become normalized to those things.
Yeah, we just saw a police officer kill another police officer because of a relationship issue, intimate partner violence. Yeah, and in this case, it was an example of the woman killing the man, which, you know, on a societal level, it's reached too far. Now, I do think, though, that and I don't know, maybe because there's no outlet for the public, that's why we don't hear from them outside of the phone calls to call-in shows and letters to the editor. I'm not seeing protests or anything like that, or demonstrations with regards to demanding the government. Maybe because we don't have an election quite yet. I also don't see this thing being solved anytime soon. I do wonder, could this be the issue that causes the current administration to be voted out of office? Or is the whole desensitization just going to continue, and there's going to be a lot of talk about it, but people will just say, well, whatever, it's all the same, and they'll vote for whoever they'll vote for, and it's not really going to affect our politics. And then that frightens me, because that just basically gives politicians a signal this issue is really just surface level and isn't that important.
Well, what I would say, that it's sad to say that, it's sad for me to say this, but it's a matter of people only protest when it's convenient to them. They only come out and cry out to the government or cry out for some sort of change when it's convenient to them and when it's certain types of people involved. And I'm not capable of saying that at all. And that's really what it is. If it doesn't affect me, or it doesn't affect somebody in my community, or it doesn't affect somebody close to me, the reality is I more than likely may not come out and protest. We saw the kidnapping and we eventually found the body of Andrea Barrett back in January of 2021. Mm-hmm. We came out and protested during COVID. Now we have no COVID. 3 children have been killed, and somebody else in their sleep during the night. And there's no form of protest, there's no form of outcry. Basically, an entire community has fled. Just a couple of months ago, we saw a lot of violence in St. Augustine. Similar issue on the train line in St. Augustine. Persons left their community. Some people left for good because they understand what's happening. And so there's no outcry to say the government, we want to see some type of change. Government, we want to ensure our borders are locked down. There's nothing, nobody is coming out to talk about anything. It's like, as I said, we've just moved on so seamlessly. And how was it that on Thursday morning somebody could be killed and we could check Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday? We had long weekends, we drink and we enjoy ourselves, and then we come back to work as normal on Monday, 5 days later. And it's like, all right, we're back to normal. Those children will be buried, we'll cry a little bit, and then it's like nothing. It doesn't affect me, so I'm not going to come out and protest.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit crazy to think of how we viewed crime just a few years ago, right? Gary Griffith lobbied and successfully got the job of Commissioner of Police after putting out a lot of public comments and publications, whether it's articles, letters to the editors, columns, etc., on his opinions on it. There was a lot of talk with regards to crime just a few years ago, and all of those situations happened. There were protests over COVID, and then it's just silence. It's almost as though I don't know. I don't understand, because it's not the first time, and I'm glad you brought it up. The death of children seems to not be an issue on some level to the country. And I don't understand it. I have a hard time wrapping my head around it.
I think it's not an issue to them, you know. It's an issue, but we as a people, we just are not coming out and protesting in any way, or crying out or calling for justice in any way that we call for justice on other matter. Just 2 weeks ago, a week ago, whatever it's the case, we had a whole lot of what about a pageant, and now yes, we saw those murders of the children, and it's like nothing at all. Just normal. A 9-year-old boy could be killed in Enterprise while playing football in the evening, and that we've just gone past all of that.
Now, there's an irony here, of course. The victims are all young people. And, of course, young people are now, I guess you could say, being affected by crime more than ever, right? Facing the realities of it. The president called for that we need more role models for young people. To some extent, there's a phenomenon where, 20-year-olds caught up in the life of crime, they basically say, well, my life ends at 25 because something's going to get me, right? I'm going to die in some way, in some sort of act of violence, I'm going to die. Can some good come out of this where we could say, listen, look at what it's doing. You might not even make it to 25. You might not even have that time that you might think you could have. To some sort of readjustment to the perspective of young people, because I do think that for younger people, the perspective on time is not the same for when you're older, and you just kind of take it for granted. You take a lifetime for granted. You don't know what you're losing. And here we have now 6-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 9-year-olds being shot and killed, right? Or in the case of a 10-year-old and several teenagers. Can the perspective for young people be changed, whether it is through role models or through the fact that they're more and more becoming younger and younger victims, that, listen, this isn't going to work out long term, I need to rethink things?
Yeah, you can have great role models. We have many great role models right here in Trinidad and Tobago. You can have great role models at school. You can have great role models who you follow on social media, for instance. But then when you come home into a community where there's no type of support, no family support, no support outside of that, and you during the daytime you're at school and it's all well and good, but what happens when you come home and you have to live in basically your living conditions are not the best, and you have other influences right within your communities. You tend to, it's easier for them as young people to just go with the flow of what's happening right within their neighborhood. They probably, if it's money, let's just say it's work they're looking for, they can get a quick work knowing they could go and shoot somebody for $2,500 or $5,000, because that's the reality of it. Whether people want to hear it or they don't want to hear it, that's the reality of it. So we have many great role models, but when we look outside of the places that you are from, let's just say from 8:30 to 3 p.m. on a daily basis, what happens when you come home to a home with, let's say, no parents, no other type of guidance, no other type of support? You just eventually fall into that particular life of crime.
Well, let's end it there for perspective, because we need to take a break. But
sure.
That last point that you made, and I more or less kind of knew what the price of a hit was in the country. I didn't necessarily know when to bring it up or if I should bring it up, but it puts things in perspective when for less than minimum wage, for less than a monthly minimum wage, that is more or less the going rate of taking another person's life in TNT. I don't know, viewers, you could think about that. But let's take a break, folks. When we return, we're going to go now bigger picture with regards to the budget and how this thing is going to unfold. Because I'm taking a question from last week and I'm rolling over here. I'm going to ask my colleague there with regards to what are we willing to give up if we want all these things for the government to spend on. Stay tuned to Talking Point on WSN. We'll be right back.
You gave us the inspiration to be first. We gave you the solutions that put you first. You walked with us side by side, and we continue to serve you with pride. First Citizens celebrates with you 30 years of achieving dreams, shaping success stories, and painting brighter futures together. And together, we'll accomplish so much more. First Citizens, together, 30 and beyond.
Let the home store turn your house into a home you love. Get everything you need to give your home that special look and feel. We offer household items, lawn and garden, paint center, hardware, plumbing, lighting and electrical, toys and storage solutions. 5 convenient locations: 6th Avenue Barataria, The Falls at West Mall, Pennywise Plaza Shoguanas, C3 Center Branch and C3 San Fernando. Check out our Facebook page for more information and come visit us today. The Home Store. Turn your house into a home you love.
From Maracas Bay to Arafita Avenue and Piaco, Richard's Bake and Shark brings the world's most popular fish sandwich closer to you. Open daily at all our locations.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios. But they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
And we're back, folks. Sean Michael Small here with Camille A.O. Pascal. Lots of names here. Camille, what does the A.O. stand for again? I can't remember what it.
So the A is Avery and the O is O'Keefe.
Avery O'Keefe. Those are very official sounding names. I don't know how else to say it. You know, it's like, that is the name of a politician. My man have a four-letter name there. Avery O'Keefe. Anyway, let me not get into that. So, moving on now, we just spoke about crime. Chambers have come out. They are repeated. The one thing that has gotten a lot of press from various daily newspapers is the various chambers, not just one or two, I think, calling for more expenditure in the upcoming budget on crime. And this is on top of other stakeholders or other interests also being asked for, you know, reduce the price of gas, increase the amount of X, increase the amount of Y. And of course, you know, various requests for salaries and whatnot. Of course, the fire service has their issues, the TTPS has their issues, a lot of budgetary issues, education ministry has their budgetary issues, etc. that we all want to see increases for. So I have to ask, and this is something that I've put to the public last week, and I want to bring up with you now. We're asking for these things. Do we have a priority, or are we just going to leave it to the government to figure out what's the priority, right? What do we really want? And then the next question is, assuming we don't have like $10 billion extra in revenue in this budget, but from some unknown reason, what are we willing to sacrifice? Because all I'm hearing for is increase spending, and don't raise taxes. That's the key point, because that came up, I believe, last week. And don't raise taxes from at least 2 business chambers. Well, that's all well and good, and I can understand the reasoning for those 2 requests at the same time, and I'm not saying that it's unreasonable to make it. Those 2 things can happen. But then now, that basically says we might have to give up something to shift the funds to get this increased funding for crime fighting. And usually the public doesn't take kindly to that. So what do you make of that? Well, you think the public will be understanding in this case? Maybe the government might sacrifice the wrong thing?
Well, I do know that last Thursday, the Minister of National Security was asked what he expects from the upcoming budget, and he said that expect an increase in the amount of in their allocation. So I know that was coming out of the cabinet retreat as well. So I expect that the Ministry of National Security will see some increase in allocation. And he specifically said it's for locking down the borders. So I don't know if it's that we're going to hear that they're going to purchase new vessels or what exactly we're going to hear, but I know that for a fact the Ministry of National Security will get, especially coming from the Minister of National Security, will get some increase in their expenditure as opposed to last year. But as you mentioned, a lot of people are calling for a lot of things, and they're not necessarily saying, well, we are willing to pay higher taxes, because they're calling for less taxes, but they're also calling for more, with a situation where we have a deficit and also a situation where our revenues aren't extremely at the best place where we'd like it to be. Let's put it like that. So I think it's one of those things where we kind of have to be careful with, but it's left to be seen what the minister will say come Monday, 2nd of October.
But, and the thing is, my thinking is, all right, if we, the people, kind of have a consensus in a poll or in whatever channels that the public has to speak to the politicians, of course, it's not perfect, right? Generally speaking, anybody that did marketing will know from before, and I guess now it's apparent in social media. Most of the people who speak are the ones who are either very happy or very upset about something, so it's not always going to give you a true representation across the board. But let's just assume that it could happen, right? If the public could just say, okay, we want X and we're willing to give up Y, because my fear is the government will give X, and then they'll have to figure out what to cut. And maybe they might do cuts across the board, which will probably please nobody because everything will get hit a little bit, right? Or they might cut something and that might not be what the public wants cut. It could be a grant. They might say, well, the fuel subsidy has to go up, has to be reduced even more, so the price of gas goes up even more, depending, because the price of oil, of course, some days it's high, some days it's low. You know, you can't take it for granted it'll stay low. I'm saying the public should maybe try to get in front of it, communicate to their officials. Of course, maybe this is where MPs being in their community to listen might help. Communicate to their elected representatives to say, listen, this is what we want. You know, and I'm willing to give up this for it. As opposed to the government trying to figure that out and then nobody is happy.
But you know, I find it, I always find it strange or funny even that we wait until right before the budget to call to make all our calls. I mean, not that we're not making it, not that chambers and different entities are not making their calls and their demands during the year, you know. Mm-hmm. But I think leading up to the budget within that last 2 weeks, once the budget date is announced, that's when we begin to call for all sorts of things. And I don't know that during the normal course of the fiscal year that chambers usually get to meet with the Minister of Finance to say this is what we're looking for too. Even when you look at budget consultation, the UNT has their budget consultations about a month leading up to the budget. And that's saying from the people what they actually want. But rarely you hear or you would see any changes to the budget itself leading up to that time. If you look at even from a ministry perspective, ministries have to send up their draft estimates. They begin to send up that from like April, May even. So by the time we're now calling for all these things, it's that ministries have already sent up their draft estimates to the Ministry of Finance for them to factor in all these things, and it's that they don't always get what they ask for. So honestly, when chambers and different entities begin to call or make their demands 2 weeks leading up to the budget, I find it's kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but they're not going to make any changes at this last minute. That's what I believe. No significant changes.
I mean, that's a good point. I overlooked that. You're right. It's more or less, budgets are complicated. You can't rewrite it or add in something without it potentially going horribly wrong because you could make a sloppy mistake here or there trying to do that last minute. This is not a paper that...
this is not something that you make on a monthly basis where you can just change it very easily. And I think that's something that we take for granted.
But of course, one would assume crime, well, rightfully so, if the Minister of National Security, if we interpret him correctly, okay, there'll be more allocations. And assuming there isn't loans taken out, that's the other fear, although I have a hard time thinking we're going to take out loans for that kind of expenditure. But loans taken out, or some great windfall in revenue. Dragonfield is not, we're not going to experience that for a while. Stuff is going to be cut. Should the public just be braced? Listen, at the end of the day, technically you have been asking for this, right? 2 weeks up to the budget, so it's being asked for. We're not really hearing people say no, they don't want this. So just be prepared for some cut somewhere, and you're going to have to live with it because crime is the priority.
Yeah, you're correct. But the extent of which the Ministry of National Security will see an increase in expenditure, that's kind of left to be seen, because I do know that, well, from my research, like at the moment, I just did some quick research. I saw an article from last year's budget where the Ministry of National Security got $134 million more than the previous financial year.
Yeah.
So even last year, we increased the allocation to the Ministry of National Security. So I don't know how much more of an increase we're going to get this year, considering that we look at last year's murder rate and we're looking at the current murder rate for 2023. And that increase did not really do anything or have any dent in crime on the whole. So I think it's one of those things that it's kind of left to be seen whether we should actually be spending more money, or allocating more money rather, to the Ministry of National Security, as opposed to redirecting it to, let's just say, the Ministry of National Youth Development and National Service, that has a lot of great programs, I would say, that can benefit the nation's youth greatly, or let's just say the Ministry of Education, for example.
Well, he did say border security, so assuming we're not talking about customs and scanners, which maybe, you know, it's not going to be that much. Well, first of all, I don't know if that'll come under the Ministry of National Security's budget, to be honest, because I believe customs is under finance.
Yes, customs is under finance. Right. The port itself is under works and transport.
Right. So if we're talking about border security and national security budget, we're probably talking about, you know, the defense force, whether it's Coast Guard, regiment, etc., etc. The amount of money we probably need into the Coast Guard to get reasonable amounts of patrols going might be considerable, because we're talking about upkeep for boats, fuel and consumables for boats, but also I don't know if we have enough working boats. That's always been one of the issues, right? How many big sail workers? We bought 2 new boats, but 2 boats ain't an entire maritime border patrol 24/7 make. Of course, I did say the regiment could go on, you know, random patrols on various parts of the shore. You just send a 6-man team here, 6-man team there, etc., to monitor things randomly. It makes things more difficult for smugglers. But I do want to close this. It's not necessarily a budget thing, but I've heard that it might be. I've heard that on one hand, some Coast Guard officers might get a call, hey, don't patrol tonight. The implication is, well, somebody wants to pass, right? And then I've also heard, well, when there is a patrol schedule, because they go out to sea for days or weeks, a lot of officers and crew members would call in sick. They don't want to go out to sea. So I do wonder if the Coast Guard itself is an unhealthy place, and we're paying money for salaries and for upkeep of whatever equipment is still working, and we're not really seeing any returns for it. And maybe this might not be an effective way moving forward unless the Coast Guard, whatever problems that ail them, is fixed.
Correct. I mean, we're almost out of time. I don't know if we have news, but what I would say is that we're not very well off in the area of monitoring and evaluation. I think that's our issue. Yeah, we speak about a lot of things. We spend money, we allocate money on a lot of items within the budget, but do we actually see those things actually being ordered? Because a lot of the times when monies are allocated for different heads and subheads, it's that they often return to the government, or they are via to different areas within the particular ministry or the particular entity, so that we can allocate $5 million for the purchasing of vessels, but that money actually go towards salaries in the end for some reason. So and then we're in the area of monitoring and evaluation. We don't check back to see if those things were implemented, if those things will actually follow through. So I think that's the areas that we lack on, and that's the reason we're in this position to a great extent right now, where crime is concerned.
We could go on a little bit longer. So I just want, as you mentioned those things, I want to just ask a general question. Do we just have an issue with doing things efficiently and promoting meritocracy and getting the job done, you know, and getting it done properly here? I mean, people will talk about it in rum shops all the time, But it seems as though we really cannot get our act together for the most part in far too many areas of, well, government or public sector interests, which are not for-profit interests, so it's not always going to be the most efficient, but still, you know, basic levels of performance, at times we don't seem to be able to meet. Just look at the bus service.
Yeah, that's one of my pet peeves. My bugs that I often talk about, because it's that we just don't. Where PTSD is concerned, PTSD is in a mess. Transportation should be one of those cornerstone things within a country, especially if you're looking to promote efficiency and productivity. Public transportation should be one of those things that you pay particular attention to. And where in Trinidad and Tobago, it's not hard to have a properly working public transportation service. It's really not hard. But as you mentioned, we just don't follow through on things. Let's take, for example, something as big as the Mokoya interchange. This was spoken about in budgets ago. In 2022, in January 2020, government said that they intend to break ground on the Mokoya interchange in late 2022. We're now in, you can say, late 2023, and that has not been done as yet. So let's just look at those things, for example. We can't get PTSD working. We can't even do something as big as, or get going, something as big as the Mokoya interchange. So we just don't follow through on things. We speak about it in budgets, but it's just like, that's just what we do. We talk.
Implementation and maintenance. I think these are things, I don't know if anyone has put them together, but those basically just seem to be ongoing problems in TNT for, I don't know, maybe the last 40 years. Is we have an implementation deficit and we definitely have a maintenance deficit. We can't have good things. We can't have good things, Camille. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll open the phone lines and we'll continue discussions. We want to hear from you, the viewer, on this. It's going to be an ongoing topic, as at least this show is going to try to bring up and dredge up some noise about crimes against children and murders of children in TNT. If no one else is going to do it, we'll do it. But we'll do all of that after the break.
We exposed 5 strangers to KFC's delicious chicken to see if any time could be KFC time. And at the first bite, the party began. We repeated the experiment during the day, during business hours, on weekends, with sunshine, with rain. And it's confirmed. KFC's flavor makes any time KFC time. KFC, it's finger licking good.
You gave us the inspiration to be first. We gave you the solutions that put you first. You walked with us side by side, and we continue to serve you with pride. First Citizen celebrates with you 30 years of achieving dreams, shaping success stories, and painting brighter futures together. And together, we'll accomplish so much more. First Citizens, together, 30 and beyond.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity, from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
I am Rondell Donowa, attorney at law and host of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Strictly Legal is a legal program geared towards informing you, the public, of your legal rights, responsibilities, and remedies. So be viewing Thursdays, 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this: screening. You must screen,
Because it's silent.
it's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
All right, folks, we're back here. Sean Michael Small, Camille, Leo Pascal. Of course, folks, Camille might have to go partway through the segment. So when you miss him, then he's gone, and we'll give him our goodbyes at the end of the show. But we want to open up the phone lines now. If you want to ask this young man a question or just give your contribution to the topic. So we've said the phone numbers at the bottom of the screen. We have our first caller for the morning already. Diego Martin on the line. Good morning, Diego Martin.
Good morning.
Hi guys, thanks. Good morning. Camille, good to see you. Sean, did you seriously ask if we have become desensitized, or I think you said complacent? This country is complacency, nonchalance, don't give a damn, worthlessness, carnival mentality, love a bacchanal. Call it anything you want. This is the reason why there's a preponderance of bad things. Any single thing you could think of, from punctuality, ineptitude, nothing working anywhere, no accountability for divers, babies' brains being blown out, old people beaten to death, weekly murder of children, teenage thugs. I need to stop. Every single thing has to do with who we are as a people, because nothing bad that happens just started today, you know. It's an exponential growth from decades ago. Why? Because people do not care. What do they care about? Soca, rum, whining, Marshall Montano. You see those things? They matter. Take away carnival and naked women, people will protest. Anything else? Forget it. People need to change their behavior. Just change their attitude. Tomorrow I'll tell you what I think about that poor little child. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, caller. We might have another caller on the line. Okay. All right. Camille, exponential growth from decades ago. The irony is she brought up soca, and what came to my mind immediately was how little it seems calypso, you know, nationally, it's just not at the same level as it used to be. Soca, of course, is more or less the king of local music and music during carnival. And the fallout from that is calypso was the social commentary, part of the art form, part of the culture. And soca is just the entertainment. Have we just lost too much?
Yeah, we've just lost things that's supposed to matter to us.
All right, we have a caller.
Really
we have a caller from San Fernando. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, Sean. Morning, Camille.
Morning.
Let me say these things, Sean. The business community, all arms of law enforcement, including the prison service, the judicial officers, the law fraternity, all those are part of the criminal enterprise in Trinidad and Tobago. And that is what we have to start to fix. Now, that is a surmountable effort to try and deal with that, yeah? So what has to happen, Sean? This is not a state, this is not a government thing, you know. People, the good people within those organizations have to try and start to fix it from within. Call out your other officers, your other people. This is what is not happening in Trinidad and Tobago. People are standing by in those organizations. You think those you have what do you call them, media ambassadors? You don't think those media ambassadors suspect who are the criminals within their ranks? They know. But are they doing anything about it? And this is where the problem lies. That is one comment, Sean. The other thing about the budget, the state is going to do what it has to do, you know. If the state, if they end up with $30 billion of revenue, they're going to run Trinidad and Tobago with $30 billion. And people will have to eat grass, those who can't afford. So what has to happen? Trinidad and Tobago has to look at and temper. People have to start to take their own bitter medicine, you know. You only run an ad there with from Nicole Larson where the guy says people have to start to look at the budget and decide what they're going to give up. That is what has to happen. We have a business community in Trinidad and Tobago that are, by and large, mostly traders. They only buy and sell. That is major. Look at all those business chambers. That is what they made up of, most of them, apart from the TTMA. And what drives that is the consumerism in Trinidad and Tobago. Who that goes back to? The population. So the population has to understand this is what's happening in the state. The state does not have the funds to do what it used to do 10 years, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And the bitter medicine is coming. Temper your taste, change your taste. You can, if you go to the supermarket, Sean, there has been a proliferation of margarine. Now, this is one example of margarine within the supermarket shelves.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what that did? But there was a rollback in the amount of butter. So it tells you the Supermarket Association understand they're seeing what's happening and they're adjusting. People have to start to adjust because Trinidad and Tobago is going down this road, come what may. And if it is that you don't change, you don't change, it will change for you. Thank you, Sean and Camille. Have a good day.
Thank you. Camille, I don't know if you have any responses.
Yeah, before I go, I agree with the caller. It's one of those things where in particular with the budget comments where he spoke about Trinidad will be a society of people who just consume. And he's right. We don't have, yes, we have people who manufacture, but manufacture things that we consume, but not in the way that they don't really manufacture things outside of things that are imported. Why can't we try manufacturing things that we import here to a large extent? Yes, it may be that we need to get the raw products and the raw materials and stuff, but let's try it and see how it works here. Let's try to manufacture different things here in Trinidad and Tobago and see what it may do to our economy in terms of when you look at the utilization of Forex, for example. So I agree with the caller in that sense.
All right. You're leaving us? Or?
Yes, we have to leave now.
All right. Well, folks, we want to thank Camille for joining us today, but the phone calls are continuing, so we'll take the next call from Couva. Good morning, caller.
Hi, morning.
Hi, morning. Sorry for the wait, ma'am. Morning.
It's all right. I have two contributions, and the young man just now said, you will come this week and tell the government the budget should change and this way you want. I find, our people very, very, the word I want to use is not radio friendly or TV friendly. Listen, look how long that they have been preparing a budget. We know it's since last year even, they pulled their staff working overtime for years from the month of January, right? They start pulling together what done, so by the mid-year, they know what they have and what they have to do.
Yeah.
So when you talk about June, they start preparing their budget. So let's talk about the murder. Why the Airlink come out and get on bad? If they started to protest, we would have protested, okay? No, but from the time the thing happened, beyond the tape, show you Tiffany as a regular runaway girl, and I think his inspector guy said she couldn't get nothing out of her. Not a word. When they find her, she ain't saying where she went, what it is. The neighbors know what the neighbors in the community know. All the gunmen, you think they're coming out to talk for them to kill them? So when we talking about lobby march, all who talking, not one of them coming out and protest. But you think the commissioner of police and all of them who saying, you think them know that a man was going to do that? You think the little girl know that is the night somebody was coming to put 2 stones by the window, creep up and shoot everybody? Where the mother and father was. Where they were. We had too many questions and not enough answers for I to be saying anything more about this. I am sorry that the 10-year-old got killed. They were saying the 17-year-old robbed an old man. People in the community saying he robbed an old man, beat him up, take what he have. The old man had children, All of us live in the community. Get payback. Why I must protest for when you saying I have a good boy and a good girl, and you know very well everybody know it's not good at all. You understand? But brother, have a blessed day.
Thank you, caller. I mean, I don't necessarily want to say that is that accounts as 100% the case, but that's something to consider. Regardless, though, the reprisal to one individual that committed a crime and the collateral damage of the rest of the house, that level of escalation, don't necessarily want to see that. So, but I understand what you're saying. I understand also people are in fear of speaking out. But we do have another caller. Good morning, caller.
Hello.
Hi, morning. You're on there.
Yeah, morning. Sangre Chiquito.
Morning, morning.
Hey, man, I just listened to all you guys here, and I was reading the papers this weekend, and I see the minister lamenting at the spat of violence in Trinidad and Tobago. The ease with which guns crossing the borders. It looks like we have a border within Trinidad, and the murders is painful, according to one minister. The next minister saying it troubled him to see the murder that take place up in Arima there. And there is no plan, they say, in order to deal with things. And all the fellas that I'm appearing on Alexander show, and all them crime show, and they're saying we know who have this, and we know who have that, and we know who have the other time. And you're talking about Forex and all kind of thing, and small businesses. You have to realize it's 3 times the Minister of Finance say they raised the gas thing, or maybe more, and nobody protests. And the best thing was the main minister's speech for the day that just passed, the Republic Day, saying Trinidad and Tobago is evolving to a better country. Could somebody help me to understand this, sir? It is really difficult to understand what we evolve into. Thank you very much.
Thank you, caller. That's a good point, because I do find there seem to be, at one point in time, a lot of the major landmarks of development, the major projects. When I was small, they were just there, the overpasses and airports and things like that. Yeah, we had Piarco, but, which is not great, but not bad, right? But outside of Piarco, how many big projects, the stadium, all of these things were built before I was born. And then it's almost like if we just couldn't really build or develop much anymore. Patrick Manning comes in his last term as Prime Minister, and he's pushing the waterfront. Okay, I get that. And now we're going to have a new airport in Tobago, and the necessity of that is questionable. The San Fernando overpass is basically a one-direction, work-in-progress situation, although it has alleviated major traffic concerns greatly. So, yeah, I don't know. Because meanwhile, education, productivity, the maintenance of what we have, the efficiency and effectiveness of leadership and management of the public sector, of the government, all these things seem to just be slowly but surely getting worse and worse over time as our resources that's available to us go back down to pre-oil levels. Let's just put it that way. We ain't there yet, but we're getting there. We have a caller on the line from Shogunas. Good morning.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning, Professor.
This budget coming up explains all the problems. Anytime you make a budget, you have to review your various activities, namely ministries. This is done in what we have the annual administrative report, which we cannot get done. So the budgets for the last 10 years at least have been guesswork. If you have a problem, you have to find out how you get it. Look what's going on with the NIB. NIB should never go bust. NIB have a thing they call an actuarial review. I have explained this to you. Every 3 years at least, they have to review their anticipated income and expenditure and adjust the figures. How could that go bust? I've explained that to you with one minister went and interfered with it twice. And when it went, and he was warned by the ILO and the government chief, the new government went and interfered with it and finished it off. And we are not addressing these problems. Right? And all the problems relate to that governance. The government is not governance. Thank you. Any question?
No caller.
As usual. All right.
Thank you. Yes, I know your argument with the NIB will get into the nitty-gritty of the numbers on how much the payout should be and stuff. And I understand that. I don't know if the public will be willing to accept your views, or rather the consequences of if I believe we do things your way, if my memory serves correct, and what you just said. So that is one thing, because I get it. I get where you're coming from, right? At the end of the day, we should be able to manage things a certain way, if the, with regards to how the funds are being managed, how the payouts are being managed. So I won't say that you're wrong. I just think that the reason why the government at the time that made that initial decision to bypass what the actuaries were saying, how much the numbers should be, and to kind of fix the rates, they did it for a political reason. Not necessarily a sound management one. It was for a political reason, motivated for social motivations. And I don't think any elected official has the guts to tell the country, hey, you have more bitter medicine to swallow. And the sad part about it is you're right. We're being mismanaged. That's what it looks like, right? It might sound simple. It might sound like, oh, he's just going on and on again about the same thing over and over, annual administrative reports. But he's right. If you don't have proper reports on how things have been, how do you know what to change, what to fix, how much it needs to be fixed by, or to what needs to be maintained? How do you know? What is the reporting then with regards to the effectiveness of all these various areas of public expenditure? So the question of management now has to come up into question. The inefficiencies already, I would argue, is beyond what is reasonable. Yes, for any large organization, and a government of a nation is, for all intents and purposes, a large, extremely large entity, right? If we just look at it as one single thing in its whole. So there are bound to be things that slip through the cracks, etc., at the lower levels. I get that, but I think that the professor is right. Government is not governing, and too much is slipping through the cracks. And there seems to be this kind of like a patchwork mentality of trying to, put your finger in the hole of the dam and hope that it holds, because we can't afford to get enough cement and mortar. We can't afford to do all the things to patch up the dam. So we just gotta put some fingers in, hope it holds for a while. Meanwhile, more holes are springing in the dam all the way down the line. We can't reach. At some point, we will not be able to reach. We have Sugar a second on the line, I think, to call in back in.
The problem is not that the government did not follow the actuarial report. The government they interfered with it.
Well, yes, I agree with you. When they made decisions.
That is the point, because
yes.
You said they made a political decision. A political decision is to follow the law.
Well,
to make up your own idea.
I think we're interpreting political decision in two different ways. I'm thinking of it in the bad side of politics. The I need to be re-elected next election side of politics. That's what I'm thinking.
That is not a part of politics.
It's not supposed to be, but in modern
that is the problem.
Thinking,
not following the law.
That's what politics is. Politics is not following the law.
Politics.
Well, politics, yes. That might be the better way to put it. Thank you, Professor. I mean, all right, for those that maybe it's good that the professor called in to clarify. Yes, it's not a political decision in the sense of governance, but rather it is in the sense of politics or politricks. What is popular? What will get me reelected? What do people want? What do people think they want? And it goes back, I guess you could say, with the budget. What do people think they want? Well, some people think they want more money spent on crime, and I understand that. But will we be willing to accept what it means? Because we ain't going to get more money on crime, less price of gas, less X, less Y, more Z. We need all the things to benefit us. We're going to get a compromise of things. Some will be happy about, some that will be vexed about. We have a call on the line from Sandy Randy. Good morning. Morning, caller. You on the air?
Yeah, morning. How are you going, man?
Morning. I'm all right. I'm all right.
You have to remember, when you hear the chief minister of Trinidad and Tobago, when he had a couple of talks a couple of years ago, one of the things he says, he's not micromanaging anybody. And all you have to understand, in order for that to proper management, you have to micromanage, not micromanage the overhead people, but the whole thing is you're making sure that everything go right. Like all the murders that take place just now. I mean, you should say, Mr. National Security Minister, I need to address this matter immediately. The next thing will happen, that will happen in the rude awakening in Trinidad, because you talk about manufacturing and forex and all kind of things. If forever any other, like the IMF and all, the World Bank and whatever it is, that come and bail out Trinidad, you know what's going to happen, brother? Let me tell you something. You see, Guyana already is 200 Guyanese dollars to $1 US. We will have the same fate. And you know what will happen? The whole bloody economy could crash. And all them fellas had to think about that. And we as independent members or citizens have to really think, because then anything you get, pension, NIS, your wages, whatever you think, will go straight down, like Venezuela, Haiti. And you see what's going on in the Balkan states right now with one of Azerbaijan and all them kind of things, and the Darfur and all that thing, it's coming. If you want to manage like that, that will go happen.
Thank you, caller. Yes, and people might say, hey, Azerbaijan, Darfur, that ain't going to happen here. Well, look at Haiti. Haiti is not quite there, but it's in a bad direction, right? Where systems are breaking down, right? Where violence is rampant, where law and order just can't be maintained. Let's go back to what some of the things we said early on in the show. Don't take it for granted that it can't happen to you. So, I mean, I guess that's probably just the best way to put it. The caller makes a good point, caller makes a good warning. Maybe, because we essentially put things in place. We have things in place to keep the exchange rate the level that it's at, right? So that is with regards to restrictions on foreign exchange, injecting more of our foreign exchange reserves, as the minister did recently. I think it was last week last week, etc., etc. We do things. Maybe the balance point for our exchange rate needs our dollar to be devalued a little bit. The minister said that he doesn't want to do that. I understand why. There are pros and cons. Maybe if we control a minor devaluation today, we prevent a major devaluation tomorrow. We prevent 200 to 1, as the caller mentioned, comparing what's going on in Guyana, right? We don't know what's going to happen to the economy. We're frightened of it. With good reason, I understand that. But the long and short is, no matter what the government tries to do when they put Band-Aids on all of the problems, nothing is coming close to being a cure. So be ready for some serious pain, because the economies do not like being unbalanced. And right now, in many ways, we are artificially propped up, so we're unbalanced. And when it comes time to right the ship, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt, because instead of being gradual over time, we've been pushing against certain things and preventing them from causing changes over time. So the changes are going to come all at once. So just be careful, be ready, and understand. Don't go off half-cocked in an election. Demand politicians to really put in some effort in what they're promising and what they're saying they're going to do, and make the right choice. Because gone are the days of mass spending. And pretty soon we're going to need a different class of politician, one who's going to be able to be more efficient and more effective in what they do, because we can't afford anything less. Folks, stay safe, be responsible out there, especially with the heat, and when you're trying to cool down from the heat. Make today a good day, as my coach always says. Thanks to all the callers. We will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.